lastly, I think we need to discuss this weekend's big release. Let's talk about Conclave, which is directed by All Quiet in the Western Front directors Edward Burgett and written by Peter Strawn, based off a 2016 Robert Harris novel. Um, it's where Ray Fiennes and kind of a murderer's row of kind of actors as well essentially play out the conclave process in the Vatican of electing a new pope after the previous pope. The movie begins with the previous pope dying, um, and it actually pairs really well. I saw this on election day, and I'm like, I am in exactly the headspace for this. That's essentially what it is. It's watching the election, trying to find a new pope, and the machinations around it. Very very simple. A lot of effort put into the Sistine Chapel, which is recreated in this, although there's artistic license used to make it more prison-like. There's a lot of work went into this behind the scenes. Like they really wanted to make this feel legitimate and kind of there's a lot of stuff where conclave traditions featured in the movie are true to life. Like there's destruction of the Pope's ring, the papal apartment being shut off, cardinals being sequestered, the Sistine Chapel's windows being like darkened, shuttered, and locked. Also, just to mention that Benitez, who ends up playing a big role in the movie, Carlos Diaz, it's his first major film performance, having previously been an architect until 2020. And then he just, after his last child left home, he took online acting classes. And there's a man who has made COVID work for him. Now he's staring across from Ray Fiennes. That's Conclave. What were your thoughts, Tom? This is getting a lot of Oscar buzz, and it's looking for that, but does it deserve it?
Yeah. Well, one question. What's black, white, and blue all over? A depressed clergyman. Hey, plenty of those at the moment.
All right, you got me that.
It's all in the delivery, you know.
I like the
Um,
dark ones. I like the dark ones.
so it's interesting you mentioned election day. So this actually this month was the Cork Film Festival. This opened the Cork Film Festival, and it opened the day after the US election.
Nice. See,
So
it works really well.
there was no way of avoiding the kind of one in one comparison of this. I think I've said this before. I love a movie that can put me into a place or that feels well versed in a world that I was kind of unaware of or vaguely interested in. So, like the idea of being in the Vatican during a conclave after the death of Pope, I just loved that it put me in that kind of environment. I thought it was clearly very well researched, and they enacted and reenacted things and that were like so excellently, and it was just really a fascinating world to be in. It's a great setting for a film, because it's the Vatican, and there's so much visually there, and it's such, even though it's confined to one location essentially, it doesn't ever really feel like it. It could, like a lesser film, this could have been like a bottle episode, but instead it feels very interesting. And there's moments where you're like, oh, it's a very modern looking part of the Vatican. That's interesting. And essentially, the reason this is so um, kind of suited to the discussion of elections is not just the fact that they're trying to elect a new pope, but also it's mirroring a lot of what we're facing in current politics in general, which is kind of the clash between traditionalist kind of conservative views and more neo liberal views and more modern views, we should say. And that's kind of what is mirrored here, what's going on in the church. And it's fascinating. I really enjoy this film.
Mm.
And it's a film that I thought could very easily have been kind of lightweight. Like when you kind of hear it's like, yeah, it's about a kind of a mystery element of what's going on during an election during the Vatican popes and all these. I was like, okay. But I actually was kind of slightly relieved because when I first heard it, I thought like I think I saw like a one word, like one line synopsis, and it was like, oh, the Pope is dead, and all the cardinals are hiding a secret, and I was like, oh fuck, you're telling me one of these people killed the Pope? That would be so low budget and trashy, it'd be terrible. But thankfully, it's not that. It takes the intellectual high road there. It's based on a book by Robert Harris, which I wasn't familiar with the book, but it definitely feels like a very kind of well researched and intricate book. I think as much as it's going for Oscar stuff, I think it's sort of also like it feels like this like in another era this would have been a very very dry film. I think it's a very interesting kind of tense thriller. And I think it's definitely bolstered by some excellent performances. Like Ray Fiennes is just giving such a weirdly kind of staunch performance. Like it feels like he's almost just playing himself at times,
Mm.
because he's very kind of like stone faced, doesn't get a rise of him. But there's subtleties to his acting that are amazing. Like there's moments where like watching this in the screening, people were laughing at scenes where it was just his fade up face. I don't know what other way to put it. Stanley Tucci, I thought did a great job as kind of the more kind of modern and liberal part of the clergy, because there's a lot of questions about who he is and are his reflection are the views he's putting out actually reflections of who he is as a person,
Mm.
or is he in this for a selfish gain? And that's kind of the question throughout the film. Are these people who are meant to be representing God and who are possibly going to be the Pope, are they actually these pious people deserving of that power, and that are they acting in a way that would be fitting someone who would be in that position? And there's a lot of people here watch that you watch and you're like, they seem fine. And then as the film goes on, you're like, oh, I called that the wrong way. There's like John Lithgow, for example, who again you kind of look at him and you're like, that could be a good choice. But as we kind of learn a lot of things, and it comes a kind of a question of, and there's a quote in the film, I think that's something like, are we really going for who's the less bad option? And that's what I
Mm.
found really, really interesting. And again, it feels like it mirrored a lot of modern elections, especially the American election was in my head when I watched this, certainly. We also have an actor who I wasn't familiar with, called Sergio Castellito, as a kind of traditionalist Italian when he wants to take church back to his roots, who I thought was excellent in this as well. He kind of steals
Yeah.
every scene he's in. We also have
Mm.
Isabel Rossellini in this movie, which is like, well, we can't just overlook that. It's like she has very little to do in the movie, but when she does act in this movie, you're like, oh, that's the way you get Isabel Rossellini for a role like this. I think it's a film that is going to play well overall. I do think it probably get some Oscar attention. Is it best picture material? I'm not sure. It there's moments where it feels a little bit lightweight and a little bit obvious. Where it's like if you're playing up those whole, um, the two kind of different viewpoints within the church. It's very easy to just say, okay, well, let's put something that's going to escalate this, and then they all get to act and shout and blah. But I do think it works as a film. I think it was much more entertaining than I thought it was going to be. I'm not sure about the ending, but the ending kind of takes it to a point of, I don't want to say absurdity, but it
Mm.
takes it to a point that's kind of like, for a movie that is at times so incredibly subtle, it feels like it just jumped up to 11 all of a sudden, and I
Yeah.
was like that, and everyone was burst out laughing when it happened.
Yeah.
But it worked. It worked. It's just a bit. It took me a bit, be like, I don't know how I feel about that
Did it
ending, but
though? Did it work,
you know,
Tom? Did it? I think you're being
I
generous
don't
with the
know.
word work
It's
there.
I'm still not sure. I wasn't sure at the time. I'm still kind of getting my head around it. But
No, if you
it took
felt it
the.
did, that's fine. I'm interested now, but
No, I'm honestly not sure. That's actually someone asked me what, and I was like, at the time coming over, and I was like, not sure about the ending, because
yeah.
it really it went from, like this film barely had like a racing heart for a lot of it, and all of a sudden it just goes boom, and you're like, whoa, holy, whoa, whoa.
With no
Um,
build up, with no
yeah,
build,
yeah.
there was
There's
nothing
yeah,
seated in there that
that's
said that.
true.
It
It's an
didn't work
odd
for
sort
me.
of a twist. Yeah. I again, I feel like there's something there that they could have tweaked to make it work. It kind of plays into comedic absurdity at the end, which doesn't suit the rest of the film at times. But I
It
feel like
felt like,
yeah,
without giving away any details, it's like it's similar to what we said about Heretics ending. It felt like they're like, "Oh Jesus, we have to make one of these the Pope, and we have to have a reason for it." And then they just cobbled together something. They're like, "What would be really dramatic and
yeah.
get people talking?" And then it's like,
It,
"Okay, okay,
there's a little bit. I don't know. It kind of almost felt like is the other thing around me. It kind of felt like a little bit like reality TV,
yeah."
like like Pope Idol. Like all these popes are
Oh
like
my
just backstabbing each other bitches. It's like all of a sudden like they bring someone there, and one of the cardinals is like freaking out, and it's like, ooh, he didn't know they were coming into the camp. Ooh, so so like
God.
that's what I mean when I say like it could have been really highbrow thing, and it kind of feels at times like it's a little bit more lowbrow sensibility,
Yeah.
kind of soapy trash in a fun way. But no, I enjoyed it. Again, I think the ending is the one thing that I'm still Not sure, but I mean, it's literally nearly been like nearly a month since I've seen it now, and I'm still not
Yeah,
sure how I feel about that ending. I don't know. Is it gonna?
it's
Yeah, I don't know. It
it's
doesn't. I'm
wild.
not sure where it sits with me yet. It's still a bit of an odd one.
It's wild. The ending's wild. I'm like like I
I don't
could
think no
see
one is going to be able to predict the ending. Like even based on what
yeah,
we're
like
saying, there's no way you can predict the
whatever
ending.
I
Okay.
say here, unless I tell you what it is, you're not gonna get it because it's like what? Genuinely one of those votes, but I kind of like I enjoyed how random it was. How I'm like that's just not the movie I've been watching. Um, I quite like this movie. I thought it was very well made, and it's a subject that I'm really interested in. I remember being told about the conclave process when I was a child, and like obviously the thing everyone gets told is about the smoke, and it's like okay, but what happens in the room? And I'm like, oh yeah, I wanted to know that, like, and it's really well made. It's really well told. The score, I want to give a shout out to. It adds attention and excitement to just kind of really boring everyday activities, but you're like, oh shit, stuff's happening because the score's telling you. I also like the subtle storytelling, which again, the ending is as subtle as a brick, but the subtle storytelling for the other 90% of the movie, like where it kind of normalizes the Cardinals and makes them just like normal, ambitious people that kind of repositions this as kind of a political thriller instead of a religious movie. Because again, I hope I'm not one of the preach atheists who spoke about, but I am an atheist. I don't care that much about the church. I find this particular tradition fascinating, but like
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, if you're going to flatten this out into a political thriller, I can get into it, and then you have the backdrop of the church and the weight of it, and this person's God's representative alive. But these men, none of these are godly people. They're people who are smoking. They're just ambitious. They're essentially looking like gamblers at Cheltenham, like for the most of it. Like it's quite fun, but they have these silly hats and outfits and so on. Um, I thought Ray Fiennes was great. I thought he carried this movie with a kind of gravitas, but also added to the kind of slow building stress of it all throughout as well. Like there was occasional just really intense outbursts where he's just like, "Oh, look at him," and he brings that energy to the role. Like at times, like and again, the chef as well was one where he showed he has that quiet intensity that you can just go to 11 like that, and it was great. Also, want to give a shout out. Really cool to see some Irish representation in Brian F. O'Byrne here. Just a small part, but I enjoy him, and I thought it was great to see him in a movie like this. Um, for me, it's a really, really good movie for 95% of the way. It's tough not. I don't like criticizing movies for what I'd like it to be, but part of me was like, I feel like it took the subject matter a bit too seriously. Like I would have liked to see. It's not that I want the atheist part of me to win out. Like I can respect that it's a religious movie and that's what the story you're trying to tell. But I would have liked to see what if this movie put the favorite. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Or like a
It
bit
had
of
a bit too
Stone
much
Cold.
reverence, like first.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know what I mean? Like at the same time, I'm like, you could also make this movie where it's silly little men with their silly little costumes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to criticize it for what I wanted it to be. On its own merits, I think the 95% of it worked. And then they had to do an ending, and the ending is so fucking random. It did not work at all. It is preposterous. And what gets me about it is there was obvious pushback from the church and its more conservative outlets towards this movie. And I don't care about like, and again, like they were criticizing this for being woke and stuff like that, and the usual shite that you hear these days. And I'm like, you just handed them that on a platter. Like you had a chance to say something and get in the mix and upset people. But sometimes if you upset the right people, you've done a good job. And the church at times can be the right people to upset. You know what I mean? So yeah, fuck it, upset them. But to do so in such a ridiculous way, I'm like, yeah, like you did. You went too woke for me, and I'm a social fucking Democrat. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, that's fucking ridiculous. Like, there's nothing at any stage which suggests that that's where it's headed. And yet now we just have to deal with it. But then you don't deal with it because it's the ending and we don't get to see the consequences or anything that comes of it. It's just like, oh, by the way, blah, 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 blah. What? And then the movie's over. And it's like, what? What just happened? Like, why did you do that? You know what I mean? Imagine like fucking at the end of it, you watch Jaws and you're like, that was a thrilling movie, and then someone at the end just goes, that wasn't a shark, that was a goldfish. See you later. What? Why? Like, what? I have to rethink the entire movie, but I still don't think that makes sense. But you just changed everything at the last second, like, but no, really well movie. I think it will get nominated for Best Picture, but I think it'll be one of those movies that we're annoyed it's nominated for Best Picture when we're like, Dune Part 2 doesn't get nominated, but this does, or something like that. But yeah, I can't. Look, it is worth seeing. It's a really well made movie. It's just I wish the